Next game you want to talk about was Giants-Eagles, which is an interesting one. You've got the Philly offense has had a lot of changes this year. The Giants losing Andrew Thomas this week. What are you looking at in this one?
Yeah, so the Thomas one's tough. I think I like the Giants side of things before the Thomas injury. And just to touch on a macro point, and I'm curious how this plays out now that Thomas is out. But since Brian Dable took over play calling, it's one thing to just like cherry pick some sample and be like, hey, over the last 3 games, they've done X because it fits my narrative. And maybe I'm guilty of some of this. But I think it's another thing to do that when you have something that is like fundamentally changed. And like I would argue that changing your play caller matters a lot. And Brian Dable took back play calling. And since then, they've basically been top 5 in a lot of schematic-like metrics. They're generating the second most separation, which is very surprising considering they've been without Malik Neighbors for a decent chunk of that. Their disruption is third best. Their perfect block rate is top 5. A lot of these sorts of their quick pressure rate is, I think, the 6th best. I don't think that's because the offensive line is so good. I think there's like a schematic element that is enabling this sort of success. I think that it does matter when you like lose a key cog like Andrew Thomas, especially because, kind of shockingly, the only real edge threat for the Eagles this year has been Josh Sweat, which I don't think any of us anticipated after the trading for the swap of Hassan Reddick for Bryce Huff. I was blanking on his name for a second there.
Hey, Bryce Huff, he was
for
like
Bryce Huff, who's
with
been
the
a
Jets.
disaster.
Yeah,
It came to me though. It just takes a little bit of time. I think it matters a lot then that Thomas is out because you would think he could really mitigate Sweat, and then like obviously it's gonna be a battle on the turf. But all of that is to say, I think the Giants are like creating a good situation for themselves on offense, and adding Malik Neighbors back is particularly important. I guess I'd stop here. That's not my main kind of angle for this game. I'm curious what you make of the Giants' changes since Dable took over play calling. Whether you think that's sustainable, and like how the Thomas injury in particular influences it.
Yeah, I think they've been noticeably better, obviously, this year than last year. There was a lot of, Jones was hurt, and that's part of it. You're rotating through quarterbacks. Tommy DeVito we had that one Tommy DeVito game against the Packers. They can't take it away from us.
That's right.
But yeah, it's looked good. It will look better so far this year. Right, they were able to move the ball consistently against Seattle. Did like last week against the Bengals, who had been really bad on defense this year. That was concerning, like them only putting up the amount of points that they did in that game. But getting Malik Neighbors back is big. Right, you have some variation in types of receivers in that offense with Neighbors as your true alpha. Wan'Dale Robinson is a quick underneath outlet. Darius Slayton as a guy who's shown he can stretch the field. So it is noticeably better than it was last year and closer to that 2022 season. I do think losing Andrew Thomas is massive for them. Because you saw when he went down in previous years, it was big for the offense. With Daniel Jones not being great, not having great feel in the pocket when he's under pressure, you kind of need him to be in those, either booting him out to get him outside the pocket with the ability to add on with his legs, or in those clean pockets to throw from. But it has looked better. And to your point on the Eagles pass rush, I was going to bring up Bryce Huff, like, he with the Jets, if you look at pass rush win rate, it was consistently like it was like Myles Garrett, Bryce Huff, man. That has certainly not been the case so far this year.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see his kind of down. I don't know if downfall is the right word, but his slow start for Philly so far. A couple of interesting trades Philly's made with Dotson too. But either way, the real angle I wanted to talk about on this game is Jordan Mailata's injury. And not just Jordan Mailata's injury, but how Jalen Hurts deals with pressure generally, and how that kind of stacks up against the Giants. We mentioned this pressure disruption concept. Jalen Hurts is losing an average of 1.2 points per disruption pressure, not the coverage version, but the pressure version. That is by far the worst in the NFL. It is like 20% worse than the next worst guy, which I actually think is kind of backed up. Again, I'm not a film guy. I watch all the games. When you just kind of look at Hurts as he deals with pressure, it actually kind of sticks out as like when it comes quickly, he's completely lost. So that's something I noticed on film. It's interesting to see that in the data. The Giants are number one in this category. And I think that has a ton to do with Dexter Lawrence, who is very quietly having I heard someone say this recently, and I think it's actually fairly accurate. An Aaron Donald light season right now. He's leading the league in sacks as a nose tackle is insane. The guy has been an absolute stud. And I think there's a mismatch on the interior, no matter who Dexter Lawrence is playing now, because no one can really block him. And Hurts is particularly sensitive to that. But you add on the fact that Jalen Hurts has basically played his games with like two studs at tackle in Mailata and Lane Johnson. We saw Lane Johnson go out against Tampa. Fred Johnson replaces him. He gives up 11 pressures. Tampa Bay does not have a world-beating pass rush here. Right? This is like
put some respect on Yaya Diaby. Come on.
Sorry, exactly. But Fred Johnson's going to be back now at left tackle. And I think in the sample we do have of Hurts under these like quick pressures, these disruption pressures, he's been really bad. Now you kind of start to increase the sample size of those plays because offensive line is a weak link system. We've talked about this a bunch, and you really just need to key in on one guy who you can who you believe can win that matchup. And also, I should mention, this is actually a key point, that like the Eagles leave their tackles on islands more than any other team. So it's not just that the left tackle has gotten worse by virtue of going from Mailata to Fred Johnson, and that matters a lot. But you also now have to help him a bit in a way that you couldn't do with Mailata. That's also going to make your guards worse now. That's where it comes in with Dexter Lawrence. So I think when you add everything up, you have a Giants defense that's done a great job generating pressure. When they don't generate pressure, they're a disaster. They have the biggest discrepancy in their expected output from pressure versus not. But given that I do think they're going to be able to generate pressure, and also that Jalen Hurts is particularly sensitive, meaning if you just like randomly sampled some quarterback in the NFL, he's going to be a lot better, and the like loss of the tackle is going to matter less to a quarterback, this randomly sampled quarterback, than it is to Jalen Hurts. So you add everything up, and it's an angle I can't get out of my head. And like the Eagles, yes, they can overcome it. Of course they can. Anything can happen in an NFL game, and they also still have a ton of talent. They can get the ball to AJ Brown in space. But I keep coming back to the same spot of like I really think the protection is going to be a massive problem for the Eagles against the Giants. And in that way, I still lean the Giants even after the Andrew Thomas injury, and I certainly like a lot of the unders in this game, especially on the Eagles side of the ball.
Yeah, I'm torn on this one because I certainly see the pressure angle, and losing Mailata and putting Fred Johnson in his place, bad. The interior offensive line deterioration, losing Kelsey, they haven't been as strong there on the interior. I think it's around 24th in pass blocking grade for us this year, with just looking at the guard center guard combo on the interior for Philly. But at the same point, there are paths for Philly to mitigate some of that pressure. If you look at the two games where they had both A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, Hurts' time to throw goes down by about 0.4 seconds, which is a pretty big jump. 2.8 in those two games, 3.2 in the other games. And that's a function of you have these elite receivers creating early separation. He can take deep shots early in the play and feel comfortable about it. The Eagles have been great against single high coverages so far this year. Pretty big splits between single high compared to two high. Giants are above average in single high coverages so far this year on defense. And you also have the potential ability to lean on Barkley a little bit in the run game. His first game back against the Giants, maybe he's got some more juice.
Revenge narrative.
Yeah, juice in the legs in this game. And the Giants have given up explosive runs this year. They've been one of the worst defenses in that regard. And clearly Barkley is one of these guys who can break off 50, 60-yard runs if he gets some daylight. So it's the pressure angle is concerning because we've talked about it. You hit on it. Hurts looks bad. When he gets quick pressure in his lap, his response is not great. It's typically him sprinting out to the sideline and throwing the ball away or throwing in an inaccurate pass. He's not necessarily a great scrambler, even though he has that rushing ability. So that's really what this game comes down to. And I think I lean Philly, but I see both sides just because the offense is so talented when you have those guys at full strength that I think they can work around some potential issues on the O-line, but it's a close one. I can see it going both ways.
Yeah. No, I think that's actually a great point. And I guess my response would be it's almost like a live situation to bet, because I think it is very game state dependent. If the Eagles are jumping out to a lead, right, you can certainly mitigate the offensive line if you're running successfully. And I think that kind of matchup angle matters less. But on the flip side, if they go down in the game, I think this is precisely the situation that's magnified. But it is also an interesting point to take into account, like the drop off between Devonta Smith and AJ Brown to the Eagles' backup receivers is huge. And if they can kind of separate quickly against a Giants secondary which struggles, that is certainly a way to mitigate it. Really interesting game. I'm kind of super excited, which is very rare to say of an Eagles-Giants game over the last 5 years.
You got the NFL hat on. We just want to enjoy some football this week.
That's right. Some good football. I wear it with pride for exactly that purpose.
Yeah, no. Just quickly on the wide receiver drop off, my guy Seth Galina is the Jahan Dotson truther, but it's over. He is done.
If he's still hanging on, I think we gotta have a little intervention.
Yeah. Cool. So you're on Giants. Any other things you want to call out before?
I'm on Giants. I think I prefer it live more so than anything else, but I wouldn't even hate kind of Saquon Barkley on the other side as well.
Sweet.